These are some of the headlines. This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, the War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman with Juan Gonzalez.
And welcome to all of our listeners and viewers around the country and around the world.
Well, today we begin with a look at Canada's attempts to stifle dissent, particularly when it comes to the Winter Olympic Games to be held in Vancouver next year. Last week, I was detained by Canadian authorities while crossing the Canadian border. It was Thanksgiving. I was on my way, along with two of my colleagues, to speak at the Vancouver Public Library at a benefit for community radio stations when Canadian border guards held us for over an hour and a half at the border. Well, it was the top story of the CBC News in Canada, the Canadian Broadcasting Corporation. Here's the report on CBC on Wednesday.
Our Canadian border guards trying to limit free speech. An American journalist is outraged by what happened to her on the way to Vancouver last night. She was detained and questioned about what she was planning to say about the Olympics. Our Go Public reporter Kathy Tomlinson has the exclusive top story.
An award-winning U.S. journalist. Amy Goodman is well known in alternative media circles.
Is the host of Democracy Now!
I didn't know we needed to have even a visa coming into Canada.
Here to promote a book.
Clearly, he wasn't going to let us go.
She wasn't sure she'd get in.
They took the passports and then said, pull over.
You were flagged right off the bat?
Yeah.
Goodman was grilled at the Peace Arch border Wednesday, asked repeatedly what she'd be talking about.
I said because we have a big health care reform debate going on in the United States. We were looking at Tommy Douglas, but he still wanted to know what else I would be talking about. And I said, and I'll be talking about the wars in Afghanistan and Iraq.
She says they were only interested in what she'd say about the Olympics.
He made it clear by saying, what about the Olympics? And I said, you mean when President Obama went to Copenhagen to push for the Olympics in Chicago? He said, no, I'm talking about the Olympics here in 2010. I said, oh, I hadn't thought of that. And he was clearly incredulous that I was not going to be talking about the Olympics. He didn't believe me.
Goodman's been detained before at the U.S. Republican convention. Arrested with dozens of others covering protests outside. Here, she says, her car and laptop were searched.
They took a photograph.
Then she was issued this, which says she must leave Canada Friday.
I said, is this routine? He said, this is what we're doing.
The Canada Border Services Agency says it won't talk about this, citing privacy.
I felt under siege. I felt monitored and surveilled. I felt, as a journalist, violated.
We wanted to ask the government if this is part of a broader initiative to question and perhaps restrict people with certain political views coming here around the Olympics. The Canada Border Services Agency didn't respond to our request for an interview.
That report from Kathy Tomlinson of CBC. But Amy, Thanksgiving, tell us more about exactly what happened when you were stopped.
Well, Juan, it was really incredible. It was Wednesday, the evening before Thanksgiving, and we were headed to the Vancouver Public Library, driving up from Seattle. When we got to the border, I thought it was just going to be routine. We handed in our passports. They stopped for a minute, and they flagged us. They said, pull over. And it's pouring rain outside. We pulled the vehicle over. We had to get out and go into the
And you were there
facility.
With
Dennis Moynihan and with Chuck Skurridge. We were on our Breaking the Sound Barrier tour, and while folks here were eating turkey, we thought we'd go talk turkey in Vancouver and talk about the columns and breaking the sound barrier. With Canadian listeners to Democracy Now!, 3 community radio stations in Vancouver run Democracy Now! So we pulled in, went into the border facility. It's a large hangar-like space. And they start going through our car, but we're now inside. And then the Border Patrol call me up to the counter. And the guard...
And obviously, to cross into Canada, people don't need visas. They just need to show identification.
You need your passport. And we were very surprised. It was almost empty, this whole hangar. So we were clearly singled out. And I go up to the counter, and the guard says, I want your notes. I said, my notes? He said, the notes for the talk tonight. I was completely taken aback. I went out to the car, and I brought in the copy of Breaking the Sound Barrier, and I came in and I said, well, this is my new book, and it's a book of columns, so I actually read from the columns. He said, I want the notes. I said, well, these you could think of as my notes. And he said, what are you talking about? And I said, well, I actually start with the last column, which is a column, as I was saying in this report to Kathy Tomlinson, about Tommy Douglas. Now, for people in the United States, he's not as famous a name, but in Canada, he's considered the greatest Canadian. Tommy Douglas is was the premier of Saskatchewan who pioneered the Canadian national health care system. And interestingly, he's the grandfather of the actor Kiefer Sutherland, right? Kiefer Sutherland's mother is Shirley Douglas, the actress, his father, Donald Sutherland, but his grandfather was Tommy Douglas. And so I said, I'll be talking about Tommy Douglas. Actually, we were at the Douglas border crossing. And he said, what else? I said, what else? Oh, well, global warming. What else, he said. I said, the global economic meltdown. What else, he said. I said, well, I'll also be talking about the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan. What else are you talking about, he said.
Now, is it your sense that this was some rogue customs agent, or that he had basically been alerted and gotten instructions to do this kind of question?
He was working with a group of customs agents with the border guard. I mean, they're armed. Another border guard now has the book, and he's reading it. But they are also inputting everything I say. This border guard is handwriting all notes about what I say, and then the other border guard is going to the computer and inputting everything. Then they say, what else? And I say, that's about it. And he says, what about the Olympics? I said, the Olympics? You mean when President Obama went to Copenhagen to push for the Olympics to come to Chicago? And he said, and you didn't get them. I said, I know we didn't get them. He said, no, I'm talking about the Olympics here in 2010 in Canada. I said, no. I hadn't planned to talk about the Olympics. You're denying that you're talking about the Olympics.
Did you even know there was an Olympics in 2010 in Canada?
This was not my topic, right? This is not so much news in the United States. I really didn't know what he was referring to. And he kept pushing. He was clearly incredulous. And at my surprise, he disbelieved me even further. He clearly did not think I was telling the truth. He kept pushing. You're denying you're talking about the Olympics? I said, that wasn't my plan for tonight. Now, of course, as the reporter had asked me, and what if you said yes? What would have happened then? Anyway, he finally tells me to sit down, and they go out and they comb through the car. I got very alarmed at what was happening, and I walked outside to where the guards were going through the car. One is on my colleague's computer, as if it was his. You know, the computer was set up, and he was going through it. They were rifling through the papers and everything. They told me to get back inside. I went back inside. Finally, they came in. We're now over an hour and a half late to the talk. And they say for me to follow them into a back room. I go with them into a back room, the border guards, and they take my picture. They make 4 copies of the picture. They take Dennis and Chuck's pictures individually, one by one. They take us in the back one by one. And then they attach them to what they called a control document. I said, I wasn't aware we needed a visa. And they said, these are control documents. And they stapled them into each of our passports. And I opened it. And it said, the control document, that we had to leave by Friday. We were coming in on Wednesday, that we had to leave by Friday. Then we were allowed to leave. We saw they had been through both of my colleagues' computers, both Dennis and Chuck's computers. I don't know if they had gone into mine. And they had gone through the car. And we eventually arrived an hour and a half late to the talks.
Amazing.
To say the least.
This is from our friendly Canadian neighbors.
Yeah, this was, to say the least, extremely jarring. I felt completely violated, I mean, personally and professionally, you know, and for journalism overall. Because this is not only a violation of freedom of the press, you know, the idea that, you know, the state is going into your papers, your documents, your sources, everything, but also a violation of the public's right to know. Because if journalists feel there are things they can't report on, that they'll be detained, that they'll be arrested, or they'll be questioned, they'll be interrogated, this is a threat to the free flow of information, and that's the public's loss. That's democracy's loss. Well, we're going to go right now to Canada, but we're going to break first. And by the way, folks, you may notice that we are in new studios here. We're going to talk more all about them on Wednesday. Quite remarkable, our new printing press studios after 8 years of the Firehouse Station, the wonderful place that we lived since the September 11th attacks. Were the closest national broadcast to Ground Zero. It was our home and hearth, our shelter in the storm. Well, we have now